And that's why I'll never trust that tour guide Cassandra or her supervisor Jorge from Buenos Aires ever again. Then again, I'm not sure if they survived the bug attack, so who knows.
Oh, the bug attack on Buenos Aires? Yeah, I remember seeing that on FedNet News. It was like 97?
Yeah, sad times. But anyways, welcome everybody to Alpha Hooligans podcast episode 4? I think it's 4. Yeah.
4.
Yeah, 4.
I'm Scud.
And this is the usual Fifi here. And this is Scud's feeling a little under the weather, so you guys are going to have to listen to my voice for a good chunk of this.
I'll do my best to keep up. If I cough into the microphone, then we won't edit it out. We'll just leave it in there so you guys can feel sorry for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Battle a respiratory infection and drink my tea.
But so we decided that we wanted to tackle a big topic here. That it's probably 75% of the posts on Hoggit, which is what jet should I get? Should I get the F-16 or the F-18? Viper versus Hornet. And it's not really going to be a versus, but we're going to compare and contrast the two so that way you guys can make the best decision possible and decide between the two jets and then come to the realization that the C-130 Hercules is still the best aircraft in DCS.
So, before you guys throw spears, there are people out there we know that buy other airplanes as their first module.
Yes.
But this is the most asked question, I think, when it comes to first modules.
Yeah, it really is. And between these two, I mean, these are probably the two best Gen 4 modern multi-role fighters, and I feel like they're fairly complete. I know the Viper probably still has a couple updates coming out. I think I heard rumors about a sniper pod for the Viper coming. Meanwhile, us Hornet drivers are still flying the Atfleers. So
sniper pod may pull me over to that side for a little bit.
Gasp!
I know.
You know, Jonay listens to this, right?
I didn't say anything.
So
dedicated bug guy.
Yeah. But anyways, so Viper versus Hornet. So I think the first.
I got a question for you, Fifi.
Go for it.
Go ahead.
No. You.
I was going to say, most of the people that are listening probably have a pretty good grasp, but for those that may not know, what defines a multi-role fighter?
Oh. So it's a fighter that can go up and kind of do anything. It's a jack of all trades. It's not a master at any one thing. Like technically things like the F-14 was supposed to be kind of a multi-role fighter, but it was primarily a fleet defender and interceptor, right? Because it really didn't do the bombing thing very well. But just like the F-16 and F-18 can do a menagerie. Ooh, big word. A menagerie of missions and roles, right? So, you can go up and you can fly air-to-air and like offensive counter-air and defensive counter-air. You can go up and you can drop bombs, or you can, you can deliver both dumb bombs and smart bombs on target. You can fly close air support. You can do air interdiction. And if you're in a Hornet, you can do counter-sea. You can go blow up boats with some of the boat-specific weapons that the Hornet has. And
I just want to clarify, a menagerie means a lot of different capabilities, not 3 people in the jet.
Oh, well, yeah. We don't fly family models anyways.
But we bumped.
Yeah, we don't fly family.
That joke fell so flat.
we don't fly family models anyways. We'll leave that to the Mudhen guys. But we're looking at good jets that most people tend to start with. And if you're on the fence and if you fly one and you're wondering if you should pick up the other, or if you don't have either and you're trying to figure out which one, we're going to try to help you by giving you the information that you need to kind of make those good decisions for something that you're going to enjoy. Scud and I, we main the Hornet. That's kind of our primary jet for reasons that we'll get into in the podcast a little bit later in the episode here. But we've both flown the Viper for a while. The Viper was my main jet for about a year, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun jet to fly. There's something about that canopy, like stepping into that bubble canopy
No, you're
And
sitting on the front of the airplane, not in
yeah,
it. You're sitting
I
on it. You
think
might as well ride with your legs wrapped around the radome.
yeah, exactly. And I think what was it like from like Mover from the Mover and Gonki show? You know, he was a Viper pilot and a Hornet pilot, right? And he's always talking about how flying the F-16 was like riding a magic carpet, and you could see why when you're in that jet. And then the Hornet, you know, it's a little bit more stout for reasons that we're gonna roll into here in a minute. And but overall they have the same mission. They're both multi-role jets. They're both jets that kind of do a lot of things across the spectrum, because at the beginning, the Viper and the Hornet were designed as the primary jet for for their respective branches. And actually, the Viper and the Hornet, believe it or not, the Hornet started as a YF-17, and it was actually in competition with the Viper of the F-16 when they were in testing, and the Hornet lost.
Never gonna die.
Yeah, the Hornet lost to the Viper for the Air Force, because the Air Force loved the Viper because it was a lightweight single-engine jet. It was super cheap, roughly. You know, it was relatively. It's not cheap to us, but it was cheap, and wasn't nearly as big as it needed to be. And then the Hornet ended up becoming the Navy aircraft because it had twin engines, could carry a little bit more fuel, and then they beefed up the suspension and the frame of the aircraft to be able to handle those carrier conditions. But random cool stories. So they're both built from the same program. They're both built from the same era, and it's a divergent path at this point.
Yeah, it's a good way to describe all that.
Which you want to do it? Yeah, I know. I just started talking.
No, that's good. That's what this is about. So let's talk about one. I just want to hit on this multi-role thing is why these are probably the two most debated initial modules to get, because it gives you the chance to do a bunch of different missions. You know, you can get an air superiority fighter, you can get a ground attack aircraft, but this one kind of gives you the chance to go play in all those different arenas. And coming from Flaming Cliffs, if you're new to this and you haven't actually put money down on a module, I don't think there's a multi-role aircraft in Flaming Cliffs. So
I don't think so. Well,
I don't think so.
I mean, maybe like the MiG-29. Isn't there like a Flaming Cliffs?
Is it really a ground
Zeus?
attack airplane? I thought it was an air superiority. But anyways,
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. You guys
it
can
can-
go on the Discord and throw spears.
Yeah, it can carry bombs. It can do rockets. But yeah, good point.
So let's break down some of the factual things about the airplanes that may drive you to want to fly one or the other. There's a couple. Actually, I'm going to throw credit at a captain I just flew my last trip with at the airline. He was an F-16 and F-35 guy. And so I picked his brain and I asked him, hey, if you were to debate the multi-role capabilities between the C-model Hornet and the C-model Viper, what would you want to talk about? And he threw out a bunch of things that I took note of. And so most of the stuff that the topics that we're going to hit on are actually from a guy who's got experience in one of these aircraft. And one of the things he threw out was survivability. And like Fifi just said, Viper, single engine, lightweight, Hornet, twin engine. And so that throws some interesting topic up there as survivability, because if you lose your engine in the Viper, you know, engine loss in the Viper means you're ejecting.
Yeah, you're a
engine loss in the Hornet may mean you limp that thing back home to the carrier and put it down.
True story. I actually
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, with the Viper, you turn into a lawn dart. One, it doesn't have a very good glide ratio as well. People say it does. It really doesn't. I don't think so. It's a rocket ship, and it's got a big ass motor on it. It's super fast. It's fantastic. But once you lose that motor, you're done, and you can't get anywhere. At least with the Hornet, you have a chance when it comes to survivability. I think losing one motor, you still have another one. Remember that mess around flight that I was doing, and I was down to like no gas, like fumes, and I shut down a motor to try to catch the tanker. I flew on one motor.
Bold move, Cotton.
It worked. It totally worked.
It
um,
worked.
but but yeah, so I think that's a really good one. And I know, obviously, people know we talk before we start the show. We share notes and things like that. I think another good one for in the game, right? Because in real world, we can compare these jets real world versus in the game, and obviously in real world there were a lot of upgrades thrown around to both the jets to make them pretty much even. But in the game, the Hornet is roughly a 2005-ish set Hornet, and the Block 50 Viper is roughly, I think, about the same time. So they're pretty even on that. But I will have to say that the F-16's radar is probably a little bit better than the Hornets as well in that sense when it comes to capability.
Yeah, I would agree. Initial Block 50s rolled out in 1991,
Oh shit!
but I don't know if the radar was upgraded after that. But I know that the Block 50 that we're flying in DCS has a better radar than the Hornet. It's I don't know how much. I know that it's easier for me to run, and
Yeah,
I've heard a lot of people say it's better. And I heard from the captain I talked about when he was talking about the comparison. He said that the radars are before he even mentioned which kind of Viper it was. He was saying that the radars in the C model Viper and the C model Hornet are pretty evenly matched. And then without me saying it, he's like, unless you go to the Block 50, and then it's way better. So
yeah. And then the other
from
thing
his
is like,
experience as a weapons school graduate and instructor in the Viper, he was saying, yeah, they're pretty much the same until you get to the Block 50.
that's fair, which is what we have in DCS. So, and then I think the other cool thing that the Viper does is you can zoom in on the radar and break out individual jets in a formation. I know the Hornet doesn't do that, and that's been a contentious point for us sometimes when we're trying to like sort like jets on a four ship when we're feeling really ballsy and we want to do like a two ship wall against four ships and try to get more missiles in the air than they do, and
Yeah, that
you
was
can't
the last
break
training
out.
sortie we did in the Hornet.
Yeah, and you can't, and how we couldn't break out the individual jets, but in the Viper you can, right? And another thing the radar does in the Viper, it's got actually a really really good ground looking radar. It's not a Strike Eagle when it comes to the radar, but you can get some pretty decent mapping off the ground looking radar in a if you get good with it in the Viper. I think Silent had me good on it in about 2 days worth of practicing with it, and we were able to pick out individual jets on a taxiway with it.
Yeah, that's something the Hornet's not going to be able to do very well.
No, not at all. But other than that, I think after that the radars kind of have roughly the same capability. I mean, both have ground moving target indicator, right? GMTI. Both have like a mapping radar that you just stare at blobs, and then both are air to air in that sense. I think the Viper radar is more complex in DCS. It's more complexly simulated in DCS, and the Hornet one's simpler and easier to use in high stress environments. But if you get really good with the Viper, you can be extremely dangerous with the radar that is in DCS with it.
Well, that
And I,
moves into another really good topic. Avionics in general, right? You
yeah,
said the Hornet's radar is harder to use and the Viper's easier. I think,
no, the other way
and this
around.
is,
I think the Viper's harder to use and the Hornet's easier to
oh, you
use.
think the Viper? Oh, I thought the Hornet was way harder. I learned to use it, and once I learned to use it, I got good at it. But I thought the Viper was substantially easier to learn to use.
I think the Viper has a lot more feature stuff to it, and I think if you study level dove into the Viper radar, I think it's a lot more complicated than the Hornet radar. That's what I'm.
Oh, yeah, I disagree. I fought that Hornet radar for a long time before I figured out the sweet
You
spot on
did.
how to use it. And the Viper
That's
was
true.
just intuitive. But avionics in general, in my opinion, I think the Viper's avionics are a lot easier to learn. If you're new to this type of fourth gen jet in DCS and you want to give it a shot, I think that the MFDs are smaller, a little harder to read sometimes, but they're full color, which adds a
That's
lot
nice.
of SA.
I wish.
The HOTAS and integration of all those systems is much better implemented than the Hornet.
Well, you
There's
got to have the
there are
stick.
very few. Yeah, you have to have a HOTAS to be able to run both of these airplanes. You're going to have some sort of HOTAS system that has a lot of buttons and knobs and switches on it. But the way they're implemented in the Viper, there's not often a time where I have to get my hands off the stick and push a button anywhere else in the cockpit in any role in the Viper. And in the Hornet, there's still a lot of reaching up and pushing buttons on the MFDs.
Right. And I think with the Viper you have to have a very good HOTAS where you have enough buttons and knobbies and switches to be able to take advantage of that.
Sure.
Because if you look at like a Viper HOTAS system, like it's got a lot of little buttons, knobbies, and switches. If you do have that and you do map that properly and you do use it properly, the world literally is at your fingertips. And the Viper does become stupid dangerous when you can just flick your fingertips and immediately make that jet do whatever you want to do. Um, I
Well, here's
do.
something I thought was well integrated between the two. And I'm advocating for the Viper in like all of these discussions, but
I
I
know it's
still fly the
crazy.
Hornet and I like it more.
Well, there's more
But
reasons to fly
in
the
the
Hornet.
yes, we'll get to some of them. In
Yeah.
the Viper, you set up your air to ground screens. You put the screens you want up on either side, and whatever screens you want to be able to cycle through with a button click. And then you set it up for air to air, and you can set it up for BVR, and you can set it up for dogfight mode. And then when you switch between air to air and air to ground with a button push, or you switch between BVR, dogfight mode, with a flip of a switch on your throttle, the screens are already preset the way you want them. Where in the Hornet, if I go from air to air to air to ground mode, the Hornet automatically goes, well, you must want this ground mapping radar. And you're like, dude, I'm carrying JDAM and laser guided bombs. I want my pot up. But it doesn't know that, and you can't preset it. So there's always a let's go air to ground, and now let me reach up to the MFD and push the button to turn on the mode I want on that screen. Where the Viper's ability to preset and cycle through those, awesome.
I will say the Hornet does do when you pull up like a harpoon or a sea based radar, it does pull up the sea radar. It doesn't pull up the air to ground radar. It does. It is kind
Okay.
of smart in that sense. I'm trying to defend the jet here.
It's kind of smart.
It's kind of smart. I will say that the Hornet is probably a little bit easier to fly control wise if you don't have like a super awesome HOTAS. Like I'm running off a cheap ass $160 G52 or X52, like Logitech X52, like general gaming stick. And because I am just a cheap nerd,
Flying like a
and
pilgrim.
dude, I am like I gotta upgrade. I have to upgrade, but well, that Germany map came out. It's 205 gigabytes, so now I gotta upgrade the computer because I don't have enough storage for DCS. Like DCS is gonna be over a terabyte of storage, but but for somebody like me who doesn't have enough buttons to run like a Viper, the Hornet, because it's a little bit more clicky in the cockpit, I can get away with it, and I can survive a little bit better.
I think the quality of the axis on the joystick makes the Hornet fly easier as well. If you don't have a really
Yep.
high quality joystick with the axes, the pitch and roll, and the Viper is so sensitive to begin with that if your stick's not decent quality, it's going to be a lot harder to fly the Viper
Yeah, I was definitely going to get that too.
without
I
adding
think
a huge curve.
the flight control system in the Hornet is a lot more forgiving than the Viper. The Viper flies on a knife edge. The plane was built to be inherently unstable, to be a good dogfighter and all sorts of things. But that having been said, while I'm there at that point, just because you could doesn't mean you should. I think that's the general rule with fighters, because a lot of people, I see tons of people taking off with like 12, or like full loadout, triple rack Mavericks, triple rack CBU 97s, like 12 freaking Mark 82s up underneath the wings. And they're like, man, this jet took forever to fly and it's a pig. And I'm like, yeah, you overloaded the hell out of that thing. And
Yeah.
so the Viper doesn't carry weight as well, and its flight control system doesn't. it's not forgiving in that sense. It's a monster, and it flies, and it's not a good monster. It's a two-headed monster because it flies on such a knife edge that if you overload the Viper and you really load it up, it's not going to perform whatsoever. You're going to be struggling to climb. You're going to be struggling to get anywhere.
If you keep it fast, it's fine. But if you get slow at all with all that weight, yeah, it becomes an entirely different airplane.
Yeah, but you gotta burn what fuel to keep it fast.
Oh, you gotta burn a ton of fuel.
Yeah, with a ton of fuel that you don't have in the Viper.
We're talking about controls and stick and all that other stuff. So let's talk about let's recap real quick here. So survivability, we argued in favor of the Hornet because it's got more engine. Avionics and radar, we argued more in favor of the Viper.
Yeah.
Let's go into the maneuverability range, right? Let's talk about the topic that's going to be a wash either way is speed and maneuverability. And without a doubt, hands down, the Viper's going to have
speed.
The win on speed. It's able to go faster and higher, which equates in any long-range weapon, BVR or harm. The higher and faster you are, the farther that weapon's going to go.
Yep.
It's able to sling hurt from a much farther distance. But where the Hornet doesn't get the speed and altitude advantage, and it doesn't quite have the power advantage, it has the ability to turn. I think both these airplanes are potent in a fight. And I've talked to C-model Hornet drivers, and I've talked to C-model Viper drivers, and both of them will argue that their airplane is better than the other because that's what pilots do. They're both going to argue in favor of their airplane. And I would venture to put it out there on the table that if you put two extremely proficient pilots in each airframe against each other, it would be a fairly even match.
Yeah,
but it is not the same kind of fight.
No, it is I would say it's 50-50, and each jet has a completely opposite advantage. I think is the best way I'd put it. You can argue that you hear this argue, right? Because like the Viper is a lawn dart. It's a rocket ship. 9G fighter compared to the Hornet's 7.5 Gs. It rates around the circle at like 400 freaking knots, which is ridiculous. And then I'm not going to go into the buts yet. And then there's the Hornet, which is a 7.5 G fighter, but it has a super high AOA capability, right? 50 degrees of AOA, and you still have control authority. And it has the ability to get so unbelievably slow to where the Viper will look like some crazy cracked out ADHD kid running around a fat guy just throwing punches at him. Because I think that's kind of like how a Viper versus Hornet fight looks.
That's kind of I like that description. That's yeah. So what we're talking about, and we're not going to dive deep and break out the whiteboard and the blue and red markers and all that shit, but we're basically talking about a rate versus radius fighter. That high alpha ability to get the nose up and get slow Hornet means it's a radius fighter.
Shout out High Alpha Hooligans.
High Alpha Hooligans. It's going to be able to turn a 180 degree or 360 degree turn in a smaller circle. It can turn inside of the Viper. Where the Viper's a rate fighter, it's turning a much bigger circle, but if it stays at its cornering speed, which is not really a speed, it's kind of a plateau, it's going to be able to go around that circle faster. It's going to be able to do a 180 degree turn. Even though it's a bigger circle, it's going to be able to get around that 180 degrees or 360 degrees faster. So where the Hornet is inclined to bleed off energy and get the nose on the enemy quick, the Viper's inclined to be patient and keep its speed up, and then after a couple circles, it will find itself behind the enemy with nose authority. Two totally different ways of fighting. And when talking to this captain I flew with the other day, I think, well, actually, this discussion was yesterday morning, so it wasn't even long ago. He was saying that fighting against a Hornet, that traditionally they had that speed advantage when the Hornet got slow, because you can get slow in the Hornet, but if you get too slow and lose your energy, you've got a good shot or two at making that work, and then you're in trouble.
And yeah,
And
you
he
park
said
yourself.
traditionally when the Hornet pulled that nose on high alpha, and the Viper would just cash in its energy, go nose high, and just climb to the moon. And the Hornet's like, I'm out of airspeed and I can't really follow you up there. And the Viper was able to disengage and reset the fight to their advantage. He did say, and this is applicable to DCS, that the AIM 9X has pretty much eliminated that as a tactic, because if the Viper cashes its energy up and goes uphill, the nose high Hornet just needs to get a tone and squeeze off an AIM 9X and doesn't even have to put his nose on him anymore.
But you know what?
So
That brings me to another good point between the jets when it goes back to avionics. So both jets have HEMIX, have a form of HEMIX, have a form of that helmet mounted queuing system. I think the Hornets is easier to use and looks a little bit better than the Viper
I agree.
when it comes to the HEMIX, because with the Viper, with the Hornet, you can queue your targeting pod on the ground to the HEMIX. You can queue your aim nines, which the Viper you can do that too, because that's like the whole point of it. You can queue your aim nines, you can queue your targeting pod, but also in the Hornet, you can visualize, you could see your data link tracks. So you could see your wingmen, you can see your data link tracks, which means you can eliminate the need for having for needing a tack hand, for needing to like yardstick yourself to everybody, because you can just look out and you can see a floating data link track. You can also see where your friends are looking down in the down on the ground, and you can see what they're targeting in the air. And I think the Hornet's a lot easier to use to queue, because I can just bump soy up twice, and the next thing you know, I'm queuing off my helmet. Versus like the Viper, you can't really do it.
It can with the air to air, and it can with the air to ground, but it's just a cumbersome set of steps. I
Yeah.
felt
So
where
sorry,
I think the Hornet was easier.
that one reminded me when you said aim my necks.
Yeah. Well,
So
let's talk about weapons then.
yeah, let's talk
I'm sorry.
weapons.
Did you have something more to talk on that?
No, 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 no. Going back to the dogfighting and the energy thing, like they're just two separate
Oh yeah.
aircraft, and they're the Viper is very tradition. It's a very traditional air-to-air dogfighter. If you get good with the Viper, you're going to be extremely good at the Viper. You're sexy. It's like driving down the highway in a Ferrari. Like everybody goes, "Holy shit! Look at that super slick, cool, fast car." But the Hornet, in my opinion, is if you can get slow with it and you can learn how to control it slow, and you can learn how to really push the Hornet to its limits, fast and slow in a fight. It's a lot of fun to troll people with, because people underestimate the Hornet a lot, I think. And
It's a
that's,
it's more like a muscle car versus your Ferrari Viper.
yeah, it is. But okay, weapons. Love weapons. Yeah, I want to.
Yeah, well, we're talking AIM 9s and AIM 9Xs, and they both have the ability to fire those, and they're both fired them off helmet mounted queuing. Both of these aircraft have 9 hardpoints, and they both carry. I think the Viper has a little bit more payload capacity than the Hornet. I gotta go back and look at the numbers. So your ability to carry weapons is pretty equal across both aircraft, with the exception of the anti-ship stuff that the Hornet is much more suited for than the Viper.
And the Viper does carry the
When,
newer cluster bombs.
Now, that being said, when we talk hardpoints, the Hornet has a built-in jamming pod, and the Viper doesn't. So if you want jamming to go up against certain threats, you're going to have to sacrifice a hardpoint. And the Viper drinks gas substantially faster than the Hornet does, especially if you're pushing it. So you need bags if you want to do any decent legs in the Viper. So you're going to put bags on the Viper plus a jamming pod if that's what you want to use. Where in the Hornet, the integrated jammer frees up an entire hardpoint for a bag of gas. And so now you've got extra gas and an integral jamming pod without burning those hardpoints.
True.
So I think it's got a little bit of an advantage on the payload there. One of the areas in payload where the Viper is better is when it comes to harm shooting, because you can load up the harm targeting sensor, and it's not like it's
a
hard
cheat
to
code.
shoot harm in the Viper, but it's the cheat code. It's the up, down, down, left, right for shooting harm. So as a harm shooter, I think the Viper is easier to do. As a harm
Absolutely.
shooter with decent gas, uh, you're limited, where as a harm shooter with enough gas to stay in the fight, you can also carry bombs and a bunch of other stuff in the Hornet.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the other one that we always have to plan around with the Hornet is the fact that when you put the targeting pod on, you lose a hard point to the targeting pod in the Hornet. So you can't on the cheeks, right? So you can't carry
You
that
lose
extra AMRAM.
aim 120.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which the Viper throws them on the chin. The Viper takes it on the chin.
Well, and just talking pods, you've already mentioned the Viper has more options with better pods than the Hornet.
Well, the Viper only has that high fidelity lightning pod, right? The Hornet has the lightning pod or the Atfleer. The reason being between that is because the Atfleer was the Navy model pod, which is the only one that was technically rated for carrier ops with shock absorbent, and then the lightning pod was what the Marines flew.
But when the sniper pod comes out, which is a much superior pod to all of them, it's not going to be an option on the Hornet.
Yeah, but still a rumor.
It's just
that is rumint. I don't know if it's real or not. So
I'm willing it.
I'm willing it.
I'm putting it out there in the universe, and I'm willing it.
But
let's see here. There's a lot more we can talk about on each one of these topics, but we want to get through the major points here.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back to the reason why the Hornet's better than the Viper.
It's in our humble opinions.
In our humble opinion, yeah, right. In this is why I think the Hornet is better than the Viper as a first module.
Boat stuff.
Boat stuff.
Yes.
Dude,
oh my god.
Landing on a runway, 10,000-foot runway in the Viper does not take much time to master, and it's not necessarily easy. It's got skinny landing gear, and you got to put it down nice and gentle.
You can't take taxi. You can't turn and attack when you taxi very fast.
Yes. Don't turn more than 10 knots or you'll tip over.
Yeah.
Learning to land the Hornet, and not just like from a 10-mile final, put it on the carrier deck, but like actually digging in and learning the Case 1 ops, launching from the carrier, returning back to the carrier.
It's so cool.
It's so much of a challenge that you don't have to jump into right away, but once you get comfortable in the airplane and you decide you want to learn the boat stuff, it's a whole part of this game that the Viper just won't get to experience.
No.
It's neat. It's really cool, and it's not easy to do. It's easy to line up from 10 miles away and land on the carrier. It's not easy to do Case 1 procedures in a congested pattern.
Hornet does make
something we didn't talk about. Go ahead.
The Hornet does make you a better pilot in that sense. I was going to say is you got to take the boat stuff with a grain of salt with the Hornet though, because while it does come basic with the package, with the game package, right? When you get the Hornet, you can fly off the Forrestal. But if you want the super carrier pack, it's an extra few bucks, right?
Oh, it's worth every penny.
Yeah, it's worth every penny.
It's worth every penny.
But that's something people need to think about too. Like the Hornets, overall, if you get the super carrier pack, is technically a little bit more expensive than the Viper.
And one of the things I didn't hit on is refueling. Two totally different methods of refueling in the Viper and the Hornet. And I'm not going to say which one's better or worse. Some people think the Hornet's easier. Some people think the Viper's easier. It is entirely your setup and how you play. But there is something cool about coming back to the carrier and realizing you're a little low on gas and they're not ready to land you yet, and tanking off the S3 Viking. That's an entirely different... Like, it's one thing to tank boom versus basket off the 135, but the S3 is a challenge to tank off of. And doing that in and out of the weather while circling at 6,000 feet over the carrier so that you can be ready to come in and land just adds a whole new dynamic to this game. Besides, like,
boat stuff.
How cool is it when the Viper folds its wings up? Oh, that's right.
It doesn't. Yeah. Yeah, when you're parking next to your best friends on the boat. It's silly because they're both really great modules, and we in a handful of these things we advocate for the Viper and that it may be a better module.
But it all comes down to we like doing boat stuff, and so that's why we favor the Hornet,
Yeah,
which is funny. It's funny that it comes down to like, why do you like it? Oh, because of this ridiculous ability to land on a carrier and challenge ourselves. But honestly, I think that's great because we like the Hornet because we like the Hornet because we like landing on a carrier.
yeah.
And if you're not sure which one of these two is best for you, don't dig into all the details like we did. Just kind of go with your gut. If you grew up your entire life loving the Thunderbirds and watching the F-16s fly around and just that plane just scratches your itch, then go for the Viper. If you grew up
Absolutely.
liking the Blue Angels and thinking that Top Gun was a badass movie and the new one was even better, and you just really love the naval side of flying, go with the Hornet. You're not going to
And
be
then come,
disappointed in either module if you pick the one that you're passionate about.
but if you do choose the Hornet, come fly with us, and we'll teach you the Hornet.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely come fly with us. Um, I honestly think that's there's so much debate over it, and I honestly think that's the simplest answer: is which plane are you more passionate about?
Yeah,
And if you pick the one you love, then you're gonna have fun in it.
yeah. And they both do the same stuff, just in different ways. And if you have one and you transition to the other, you're going to hate the other. Like if you have the Viper and you want to learn the Hornet, you're going to think the Hornet's the hardest thing and it's stupid. And I wish I knew this about the Viper. And that's because inherently you're more comfortable with one or the other. And it goes both ways. Like I started off in the Hornet, and then I went over to the Viper, and I was like, man, I freaking hate this jet. And then I learned to love the Viper because I stuck with it for a little bit. But I've gone back to the Hornet because of boat stuff.
Because of boat stuff.
Because of boat stuff. It's made me a
Because
better
of
pilot.
the B stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
It does make you a better pilot. It is a damn big challenge to learn to do the carrier op stuff right.
Yeah.
I do want to throw out an analogy that Jimmy Chaos has thrown out, and I'm gonna modify it and make it a little bit more of my own. He says it's like a scalpel versus a hammer, and I would say that the Viper is like it's like a ninja samurai that like is gonna cut you in half with its sword, where the Hornet's more like the deranged lunatic that's gonna drag you in behind the shed and beat you with a 2x4.
It's so true though. Yeah, you'd have to be a little off your rocker to fly a Hornet properly, because the Hornet like allows you to dare to be great. And the Viper is like very regimented. Like if you just fly the numbers properly in a Viper, it's going to perform exactly as you expect it to perform. But the Hornet, there's something about the Hornet for me that like where I'm like I wonder if I can get away with doing this. And then I do it, and then I'm like, hell yeah. Like, yeah, I love this jet.
All right, so we haven't talked about this ahead of time, but I'm going to throw it out there. I think we should throw a poll up on the Discord, and
Okay.
everyone can go in and between the Hornet and the Viper, and we can get a feel for all those that follow us on Discord. If you're listening for the first time, or if you've been listening and haven't hit us up on Discord, jump on the Discord. We'll throw a poll: Hornet versus Viper. What do you like better? And I'm just really interested to see what the audience numbers
Yeah.
come back to on
I
that.
want to see the argument. But speaking of the Discord and speaking of everything else, guys, we want to appreciate everybody. We want to tell everybody that we really appreciate all of the support so far. And the last podcast, the last episode, we had the highest viewership of any of the episodes so far. And we talked about this all week. Like we were just super excited. Like I just kept going back and clicking back on it, just watching the view count go up in the analytics.
Oh, me too. Same.
Yeah.
We
So
also scored a new player on one of the servers we fly on,
yeah,
who
I
was
think
not involved in any groups we're on. He just saw that we were doing a podcast that was posted somewhere on Reddit, and he listened to it, and he was like, "Cool!" And he joined one of the servers we're on through the podcast,
yeah.
which is exactly what we want this to be about.
So I'm gonna make sure I keep putting the Discord link in here. But also, guys, we're getting to the point where I personally, I haven't even consulted Scott about this. I'm just going to put him on the spot right now about this. But
Uh-oh.
I would love to do something to give back to the community as often as we could. Scott and I do this for fun. We don't need the money from this either. Either of us don't need the money from this. We're fortunate enough to have some decent jobs. But subscriberdom, it would really help us if you guys spread the word, go out there, throw the posters in the streets for us, get subscribers in, subscribe, so that way maybe eventually we can monetize this, but so we can give it back to the community. We're not going to pocket anything off of this at all, until we start making millions, and then we might take a little bit, but
Just a small cut.
Just a small cut. I just want a yacht in Monaco. That's all I want. I just want to watch the F1 race.
That's lofty.
Yeah, I'll name I'll name the yacht Hooligans. Like I'll fly everybody out. We can all just party on the yacht in Monaco and watch the F1 race in Monaco. So
Damn. Yeah, you're selling it way more than I am. I just want companies like Moza and Virpil to send me free stuff. That's all. Yeah. That's as far as my ceiling went.
But yeah, I mean, it would be really appreciated, you guys. Please subscribe. Please follow. Help us keep this going. We're not going to try to pocket anything, but we want to be able to do giveaways. We want to be able to give stuff back to you guys. And I know over on the 56, the Warbox server, every campaign, the guy who scores the most points in the campaign, using whatever points judging system that Jimmy uses in the campaign it's like participation based. Like if you get more kills and you do more stuff and more actions within the server, at the end of the campaign, he gives away free stuff like maps and modules and things like that. So we want to do the same thing. So please subscribe, get things going, and that way also we will start picking winners out of subscribers. But we're not going to be able to do that until we get things rolling a little bit better. So if you guys can do that, that would be super awesome, and we can really start having a lot of fun with this. And then again, I'm going to link the Discord down below in the description. We'll get that poll up. I'll put that poll up. What is it? So it's Saturday night right now. Happy Easter, everybody. I'll put the poll up like first thing Monday morning, so everybody has a chance before I start running around to job sites. So that way everybody has a chance to listen and then go to the poll. So it's just not some random poll showing up in the Discord on Saturday night. But again, thank you everybody for showing up. Thank you for listening. Love you guys. And
thank you.
Yeah, Scott, any final thoughts? I know I just kind of stole your thunder.
No, you're good, dude. I'm saving my voice.
Yeah, saving. You get it for the sexy pilot voice. Hey, Scott, what's your longest in the jet?
My longest
Yeah,
not like. I mean,
this was. I saw this on Family Guy. It was like a Quagmire.
Yeah,
joke.
what was the? Yeah, it wasn't. I was gonna say not like Quagmire. I
13
actually
seconds?
try not to do the pilot.
Really?
But I've never thought about it. Now I'm going to be paranoid about it, and I'm going to think about it the next time I talk on the intercom.
When I was getting my pilot's license, I did it. I caught myself doing it. My CFI looked over at me and he was like, "No." So...
No, absolutely not. Knock it off.
So, all right, guys. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you guys next week. We're going to crowdsource the topic for next week, and then if you guys want a guest, do that. We might be able to harangue Jimmy Chaos back in. He might become a regular. He really enjoyed being on it, and everybody apparently loved having Jimmy Chaos around. So we might have to conscript him to be a regular. But yeah, thanks guys. We out for continue this Midwest goodbye. So see ya.